Hi, good morning. Today is December 6th, 2025, and it is 7:38 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. And my house is located 300 feet away from the house of a gentleman by the name of Robert Mueller, who was the director of the FBI for several years ago. And this is very relevant to this conversation. So this recording is going to be demo D91-5. Initially it was supposed to be a videos, three video series, but they keep obstructing justice, so I have to keep expanding it. So now this is going to be the fifth installment of this series, mini series, right? The 91 series. And I've given this, so this demo 91-5 has a name, right, attached to it, the name of an individual. It's a gentleman by the name of Nathan Ochsner. It's spelled Ochsner. But not as a person, but as an official. So this person is an official of the federal court. So he's an officer of the federal court, right? Of the Southern District of Texas, Houston Division. And he is the clerk of the court, right? So that's why he's important. And I usually don't give the demos the names of people, but I think in this case he earned it. And I'm gonna tell you in a second why. So let me get started, right? Let me start by sharing my screen with you, so you can see. I have a few talking points. I think it's this one. Okay. So yes. So Nathan Ochsner. So the talking points I have is to talk about what happened with his filing in the federal court, and that's why the reason he earned the name of the to name the demo after him. And I have a couple of small things after that. I mean, they're important, but they're not super long topics. So let me start by saying what happened, right? Oh, by the way, and all this evidence and documentation is in this folder that is both in Google Drive and also in the cloud storage bucket where I keep the evidence about the wire fraud. So all this is related to the wire fraud that Troy Pickett and Morgan Heibner and William Kyle Adams committed, right? And on the using the lower courts, right, to deprive me from money and property. So let's open that folder, right? So this is what happened on Thursday, right? That was Thursday, the 4th of December. I went to federal court and I filed that document, and you can see that in the demo D91-4. I filed the second amendment, second amended complaint on that case about the deprivation of civil rights under the color of a state law. And I already discussed in demo 91-4 all the changes to the complaint, right? And how I was naming William Kyle Adams as the main or the first defendant in the complaint, and how I've spelled all the ingredients, clearly spelled out in that document, all the ingredients for what could be eventually wire fraud charges, right? If a prosecutor, because that's the thing, at least here in the U.S., a citizen cannot, bring criminal charges, right? This has to be done by a federal prosecutor. But everything is laid out in this document, right? Including the evidence of the wire fraud. So I filed that, And that was on December 4th. And in the previous demo of the series, you can listen. If you listen to it, you will see that I mentioned that it was strange to me that the person that was working at the clerk's office receiving the documents, right? She was wearing gloves, like those like those synthetic gloves that nurses or doctors use, like the same, like the blue ones, right? And it was strange to me because in all this time that I've been filing documents in all these courts, I've never seen this, right? The clerk wearing gloves. So I have to give you a bit of detail about that document, right? So what I filed was something that called a motion for a leave to file the second amended complaint. What this is really, right? Because once you file a complaint, you cannot just change it, right? So you have to ask for permission from the court to actually amend the complaint. And once they say yes, it gets filed, right? So the way it's done, right, you would file this motion where you're asking for permission to amend the complaint and you explain why this is a good, and this is more like a kind of a procedural motion, right? Like it's usually granted, like it's, I mean, unless they have a very strong reason, right, it should not be denied. But so you would file this motion and you would attach as an exhibit the actual document that you want to replace the original complaint by, right? Like, so the new document, you attach it as an exhibit. And I've done this before, right? Like I did in this same case, right? And the previous time I did it was document number 6 in docket 6, the index 6 in the. So let me show you what it looks like, right? So for example, this is when I filed the first amended complaint, right? So you file a motion for leave to file, and you explain why this is necessary. And then you attach as an exhibit the actual complaint, right? And you say it gets filed as a single document. And then after that, the next day or sometime after that, the court says, yes, okay, let's accept this. And then what is an exhibit in this one becomes a new filing, right? So this is the procedure. And as you can see, I've done this before, and I've done this multiple times in multiple courts. So I'm very familiar with the procedure. So I do the same on the 4th, right? I go to the court, I file the motion for leave to amend, to leave to file the second amended complaint. But I see that the clerk is wearing gloves, right? And I'm going to describe the lady because I have to tell you, this person, I've never seen her before in that court. And at this point, because I filed so many documents, right? And this particular court where they haven't given me access to electronic filing. In fact, I've requested it multiple times and they deny it, right? So I'm forced to file in person. And at this point, I think I know all the people that work at the clerk's office that receive documents. Like I've seen them, it's been a while since the last time I saw somebody that I had never seen before, right? But this lady on the 4th, I have never seen before. So I'm going to describe her. She's an older lady, I would say, probably 60, 65, Caucasian, short hair, blonde. Her skin is very white. She's probably 5'6". I would put her at 5'6", maybe 5'7". And I would put her around 140, maybe 145 pounds. She looks very motherly, right? She would look like your grandmother, something like that. And she was wearing these blue gloves, okay? I believe the gloves at this point, because all the things I'm going to tell you, I believe the gloves were a move to not leave fingerprints in the document, right? So what happened is, that night, after 5 or 6 hours, I gave demo 91-4. In that demo, I said, it's been 5 hours and the document does not appear in the docket. Right? I noticed that, even on the 4th, and which is strange because usually it takes an hour maximum. Usually when I come back home, the documents are already in the docket. And I've seen this before, and I file documents that are 100, 140 pages, and they get within an hour into the docket, right? So it's not because of the number of pages. And this one has something like 74 pages, I think, right? But anyhow, I made the observation on the 4th that the document, it had been 5 hours, and the document had not gotten into the docket. So, the night passes. The next day, so yesterday, the 5th, which is a Friday, at around 11, or maybe 12:30. I have to check the time. But I check the docket, and the document is still not in the docket, right? Like it's not there. The index, so there's no new index, and the document is nowhere to be seen. So the first thing that happened, and I'm going to start telling you specific observations, right? And they may seem individually like a small things, but if you put them all together, I think they show a pattern, right, of obstructing justice and trying to cover the crimes of William Carl Adams and Morgan Hyber and Troy Pickett. Right? So at 12:30 or something like that, I check the document is not there. Immediately, I call the clerk and I record the conversation. The conversation is recorded and it's in this folder. You can, if you go to this folder, there is a subfolder that says Drive Download and has the timestamp in which I downloaded the folder. And in there, there's 2 recordings. Right? One of them, I made 2 calls to the clerk's office. I imagine the one that's bigger is probably the first call. Oh, the time is here. So, yeah, one of these 2. Let me see which one is it. Yeah, I think this is the one. This is the first call. The one that ends. So the meeting ID is FTQ-VGPQ-KAI. Right. So that's the first call. I call and somebody answers the phone, right? And I explain the situation. Listen, I filed a document yesterday and I don't see it in the docket. I was wondering if there's anything wrong with the document. They say, wait a second. They ask me for the case number. They check and they say, no, I'm seeing it in the docket. The person says, right? I have to tell you, I have the docket open in front of me and I'm seeing the docket and it's not in the docket, right? So I know that the person isn't telling me the truth. And you may think, well, maybe something was wrong with your computer. I have to, ask you to please give me the benefit of the doubt that I'm, if you put all the users of the internet together, I'm not going to say that I'm the most sophisticated user, but I would be probably on the, 75 percentile, 80%, I don't know, right? Somewhere around there, right? I'm not, I know that it wasn't that it was cache or anything like that. So I know, right, that it's not I'm making a mistake. I know the document is not in the docket, but she's telling me that, right? So when she says that, I go and try again and refresh the page and search again, and the document appears in the docket, right? I imagine when I call, they put it in, right? But okay, I say, well, doesn't matter, right? As long as it is in the docket, I'm happy. Like that's my end goal, right? To get the document in the docket. And I hang up. But when I hang up, of course, I'm gonna ingest the document into the pipeline to check that they didn't change one word in the document, right? Because that's another thing that they could alter the document, right? Changing something that would make it invalid or procedural invalid to get it dismissed. So I have to ingest it to run a diff with the actual document that I filed. So when I'm downloading the document, I see this is done through a system called Pacer in the US, right? That allows you to search documents in federal courts. And you have to pay for every page that is downloaded. And it costs 10 cents per page or something like that. Or one, yes, 10 cents per page. And they charge you up to 30 pages. Like if it's more, so it could be $3, I think is the maximum, right? So, but when I try to download the document, it's trying to charge me 40 cents. So because it's 4 pages, right? So this, I saw that this wasn't the full document. The full document was 70-something pages because it had this attachment that had all the evidence of the wire fraud. So of course, I opened the document, right? Because I'm saying I downloaded, I paid the 40 cents and I downloaded the document. And that is document 26, right? And you can see that it has only 4 pages, right? It says page 104, right? And you see, it's missing the attachment, right? So what she did is that, and they, right? Because this probably was multiple people. The person that received the document on the 4th that had the globes, right? The blue globes, that was wearing the globes, she filed only the first part of the document. She didn't actually file the complaint, which is what contains the serious allegations and the evidence, right? So the most important thing, she didn't file it. And the document wasn't in the docket until I called. So if I didn't call, they wouldn't put it in the docket, right? So I said, well, I'm going to call again to talk to them, to ask them to please file the second part of the document, to put it in the docket, right? And I have to tell you, in this process, I took a snapshots of the docket so I could, record this as evidence and show people that I'm not making this up. Like, this actually happened, right? Because they could say, well, you didn't, see the docket correctly, or you didn't read it correctly, right? So this is the state of the docket. This in this folder of Nathan Ochsner, there's two subfolders that have the state of the dockets at two different times yesterday, at 2 p.m. and at 1:53 p.m., right? So I'm going to show you first the 2 p.m. So at the 2 p.m. state, you can see here, I'm going to have to download it to show you, I think. Yes. Let me download it to show you. Okay. So this is the state of the docket at 2 p.m., right? And you can see, so this is after I made the first call. You will see that it appeared in the docket, right? With the date of yesterday. But it says entered on the 5th. So you see, there's the first thing, right? The date of entry is different. And this is not the case on the others. You can see before in the others, the date of filing is the same date of entry. You see? 11/14, 11/14, 11/14, 11/14. 10/28, 10/28. I think there is not even one document in here that has a different filing date and entered date. Right? This is the first time this happened among 26 documents in this docket alone. And if I check the docket, it's the same, right? But okay, it's, at this point, we can still think that it's just that they were too busy, right? On Thursday afternoon, and they delayed this until Friday. It's possible. But note that the document it says, this text that says it's a motion for leave to file second amended complaint, and it doesn't have any other links in here. And this is important, what I'm telling you, right? Like, it doesn't have anything else, okay? Now, the next thing that happened, when I see this, I call again to ask them to please file the second part of the document, right? Like, to fix the problem. I'm hoping that this is just an error, right? At this point, and I said this before, right? Like, when I see this thing that, seem to me like they could be intentional, but I give people the benefit. I mean, I'm not going to say that this is intentional, right? I don't have enough information yet to make that call. Which is not really completely accurate, because I have all the information that I haven't told you. But you have to be. You always need to make an effort, to try to push yourselves to believe in others, right? That the others that have good intentions, right? Unless that what you're seeing is overwhelming, right? Which is it's overwhelming that that is the case, that this is intentional, right? Which is what happened with all the events that happened after, right? But at this point, right, I call again. When I call again, somebody answers the phone. It's not the same person that answered before, and she's telling me that she's going to check the docket, but then she puts me on hold and redirects me, like, I see that they're not going to answer the phone, right? And I waited for and this is also recorded. It's the second call in that folder, right? If you go to this folder, the other call is that me trying to contact them again. And you can, if you hear that, you will see that it was impossible, right? They were like, playing ping pong with me and transferring me from one phone to another, right? At this point, I said, obviously, they don't want this in the record, right? They are avoiding to get this into the document. Because first, the document wasn't there at all. Then when I called, the document appeared, but appeared incomplete. And now I'm calling, and they don't pick up the phone, right? So what I did, I printed another copy of the document, and I went back to the court immediately, right? Took the card, and I went there. When I go to the court, there is a long line of people, and this is also unusual because I've been, as I said, I've been filing in person because they don't give me e-filing access, and I've been doing this for months. And every time I go there, it's there's no line. Like, this is not a busy office, and it seemed unusual. Like, it seemed to me like those people were there to delay me, right? So they could fix the problem on the computers. But anyhow, I make the line, and I had to wait almost an hour right, to be able to hand this document to the clerk, which takes 5 seconds, right? There were people asking us ahead of me, right? Asking the clerks all sorts of questions and taking their time, and the clerks were like, you know, but okay, I waited the hour, and when it was my turn, I handed the document, right? As soon as I hand the document, I go to the computers that are next to the clerks. I mean, they have some public computers that you can use, right? And I check the docket. Being at the court, it was 2:53, I think, no, 3:53, 3:53 p.m. So when I checked the docket the second time, and I took a screenshot of it, right? Is this over here. So what I'm doing is showing you the diff, right? What the docket looked like before I went to the court, and what the docket looked like after I went to the court, right? So after I go to the court, remember, this is what it looked like before, right? See, it doesn't have any other text here after the enter 2005, 12/05, 2025. After that, there is nothing else. But after I went to the court, this is what it looks like. Now, it has this link that says number 1, second amended complaint, GLD4 and GLD4. And this is interesting, right? Because remember, the person that's, I talked to the previous day was a lady, right? I imagine these initials have to correspond to the person that actually filed the document, right? And in the two cases is the same initials, JLD4, but the person on Thursday afternoon was a lady, and the person yesterday was a young man, right? So this is another anomaly. If two different people, touch this docket, but then, but the important thing is that after I went to the court, the docket changed, right? Which, I mean, shouldn't be. The docket entries need, I mean, if the docket entries can change like that in different days, I mean, this is how do I say this? Unauditable, right? Like the idea of a docket is to have an index of documents that it's unmutable, because that's the only way it's auditable. But if you can change the same entry in different days and add or remove text, I mean, you see, there was text that was removed. In the previous day, this text that says enter, yes, you can see it's changed because there is a dot that wasn't there before. You see? After the GLD4 on the previous day, right? Not even the previous day, 2 hours before, right? The GLD4 was among parentheses, and it had a dot. And this is also interesting. I'll tell you that in a second. Right. At 2 p.m., it didn't have the dot, right? And you can see that here, GLD4. And at less than 2 hours after, it had a dot, and then the text was moved, and this was inserted. Number 1, second amended complaint, right? And if you click on that number 1, that is the attachment. Right? So you are able to download the attachment if you click on that. So what I'm telling you is that they only added the actual document after I called 2 times, and when they saw that I went to the court with another copy. At that point, they added, right? But if I had not done that, they wouldn't have done that. And they changed the docket entry after the fact, which, sounds to me like should be a no in this kind of system, right? Because otherwise, anybody can put anything in here. And you can see it was changed because this dot was inserted after the username. Now, there's an interesting thing about this, right? The way that dot was inserted is interesting to me. And this is a personal observation. I mean, I'm observing this right here, right? This doesn't come from the pipeline. But I think this tells that this person that did this change is Hispanic. The reason I say that is because we Hispanics, I was born in South America, and my mother tongue is Spanish. And we have this thing that when you're writing a sentence that ends in a parenthesis and you want to finish the sentence, you put the dot after the parenthesis. But I think, and I mean, I might be wrong about this, right? Because I'm not a native English speaker, but I think from what I've seen through the years that I've lived in North America, that in English, this is incorrect. If you have a sentence that ends in a parenthesis and you want to put a dot to finish the sentence, you have to put it inside of the parenthesis, right? So this suggests to me that the person that made this alteration in this docket entry is a person whose first language is Spanish. It's not English. I don't know. It could be a good lead, right? A tip. But anyhow, so after all this is that they finally put the attachment in the docket, right? But still, this is 24 hours, more than 24 hours after the document was actually filed, right? This document should have been correctly entered yesterday. I mean, the day before on the 4th, right? But it wasn't, and it wasn't in the docket at all. Like not even the motion for leave to file. That wasn't even in the docket. When I called the first time at, I don't know, 1 p.m. or something like that, which is recorded, right? But then she said, no, I'm seeing it. And then they put it in there, but they put it incomplete. And then I call again, they don't pick up the phone. I go to the court and then they fix it, right? So it seems to me like they were intentionally obstructing justice. They were intentionally obstructing this document getting into the docket, right? So it's, now I have to tell you, the other thing that I knew, because, like, I have the geo index, right? So I know that the clerk, this person, Nathan Ochsner, I know that he's marking the index since months ago. And I worked I did a project, like I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, right? In which I started by automatic means identifying key people using a pipeline that I built, custom built, that operated on a lot of signals, including the geo index. And I started mailing them the books, right? So the people that were marking the index got a copy of the book, right? And I think, I have to check, but I think he got the copy of the book like 3 months ago, right? And this was something that wasn't done by me manual, right? This was done by an automated system using the data that Diosdado Cabello and the Communist Party of China are using to harass people, right? And to spy on people. So, if he appears in the index, right? And he's there, and the system automatically picked him up months ago and sent him the book. And now, when I'm trying to file this devastating evidence against this criminal enterprise, in this local area led by William Kyle Adams and Troy Pickett, and his office intentionally obstructs the filing of the document in this overt way, right? It's what I always say, right? Dog typing. If it looks like a dog, if it walks like a dog, if it quacks like a dog, it probably is a dog, right? So, in light of this overwhelming evidence, right? His house is marked in the index, and I'm gonna that. I mean, I'm gonna show you, right? That is also in this folder that I created for him, right? So this is the and this is public information, right? This comes from public records. This one, right? So you can see that, and his name is not very common. His last name, right? So that last name, Ochsner, there's only a handful of individuals in the Houston area, a very small group of individuals that have that last name. And this house is registered to somebody with that last name and first name, Nathan, right? So, I mean, the probability that this is his house is like 99.99%. And the house is registered, he uses as an agent for the property taxes, which is O'Connor Associates, which is a big component of this network here locally, right? Because they have a thing with those property taxes. And I know that because I have the data, and at some point, they recruit me as a client of that firm. Of course, to get, access to my financial information, right? But anyhow, that house, which is 26702 Gray Swan Drive, Katy, Texas 77494, if you look it up in the GeoIndex using spyhell.org, which I did, and I recorded the results here, right? You can see that his house has multiple points inside of the perimeter. He has more or less, I would put it probably at 16,000 points, which is a lot, right? Like, so he has an equivalent number of points, I think, as Phil Denning, something like that, right? So, and these are crypto payments, like that's what these numbers represent. So, I mean, he's marking the index with the crypto payments. He's obstructing justice in this overt way in multiple attempts. Because, I mean, when I called the first time, they could have put the document in it, right? Like they could have said, well, he saw it, right? Let's put the document in. But no, they put the document incomplete, right? And then only after I go there, more than 24 hours after the first time I went there, is that they actually put the document in, right? So they tried multiple times, right, to deceive me in this way, so the document didn't get in. Now, this is an interesting thing, right? Because I was thinking about this. I was talking to my brother, and I told him, listen, this is something that here, I have to think about, right? Is the following. Because I already filed the document on the previous day, on the 4th, right? I mean, when I say the day, I mean William Kyle Adams and Troy Pickett and Morgan Heibner, right? And the Adams law firm. Uh, because I already filed the document, right? And they stopped it in this way. Now, it's incredible to me that William Kyle Adams has influence over the clerk of the federal court. Right? I mean, this is amazing. But of course, I understand it's not him directly, it's the Communist Party of China, right? Who is orchestrating all this at the end. But the thought was, they already know what the document contains because they stopped it, right? So they read the document, and I remember I mentioned in one of the demos before, I think it was 91-4, that the Venezuelan informant had told me their reaction to the document even before it got into the docket, right? So I know they're panicking about the document, right? And they already saw what the document contains, obviously, because they stopped it with the clerk. So the question that has the obvious question that I have to ask myself, and if you are an investigator, you have to ask yourself too, is what do they gain with stopping the document? Like, what is there to win? I mean, the document already exists. I already produced the document, right? I'm already able to produce these arguments in writing and verbally, right? So even if they stop it with the clerk, I'm gonna go, if it's not on Friday, it is on Monday, but I'm gonna go again and file it again, right? They cannot stop me from keep trying to file it, right? So why stop it with the clerk? Like, why would they stop it with the clerk on Friday? I mean, there's only two things I can think of, right? And these are a hypothesis, right? I can't prove any of this, but I mean, this is what is the only logical explanation. One could be that they were hoping to gain time, right? 3 days. I mean, how many days it would take me to see the problem, right? That the document is not in the docket, and refile it, right? That's option number one. But if they want to win time, I mean, that's the only option, right? But the next question is, why do they want to win time, right? So there's two possible explanations, right, that I see. Maybe there's another one or more, but there's two things that I see possible, right? One is that they were hoping to flee, right? Like there's, we're going to leave town before the FBI or I don't know, whatever, right? Seize this document, right? But I don't think that would be the case because, I mean, they're licensed professionals. They can't just pack up and leave, right? I mean, it's impossible, right? And we're talking about 3 lawyers, right? At least 3 lawyers, right? The other explanation is that, I don't know, somebody in their group or that works with them or for them, somebody that is part of the conspiracy was hoping to get a chance to harm me before I could refile it, right? That's the only thing I can think. So it's either that they were going to flee or that they were going to harm me, right? Because otherwise, what is there to gain by stopping the document in this way? When they know the document exists, the arguments exist, and the proof exists. What else could they gain with that extra time, those few days, right? So I don't know. But in short, you can see that this is not a clerical mistake, and it's not a standard procedure, because if you compare it with the first time I amended the complaint, the first amended complaint, you can see that it was filed as a single document, and the attachment is in there. But when I introduce the second amendment complaint that has the proof, the actual proof of the wire fraud is there, right? Like the emails of Morgan Heibner, the filing of Pickett of November 7, making demands for payment, like all that is in there. Then they stop it with the clerk. And the clerk is marking the index. And he received the book by an action of my automated pipeline months ago. So, and by the way, the next thing I did, which I think was last week, was I took the list of the orders of Amazon. So those orders that were generated by the pipeline, right? People that got the book automatically in this fashion because they are marked in the index. I took that list and I reported them all to the IRS. Because in that ordered list, in that list of orders, there's the names and the addresses, right? Because to ship the books physically through Amazon, the system had to find the addresses. So because I have the names and the addresses, it was a no-brainer to take that list and report them all to the IRS. What I'm saying is, it's possible. I have to check, really. I haven't checked this, but it's possible that if he got the book, I'm talking about Nathan Ochsner. If he got the book, he's probably already reported to the IRS, right? So if that's the case, this act of obstructing justice, I think, would extend not only to his radius of influence, which is the court, right? It's not only obstructing justice within the context of the court, but if he was reported to the IRS, it means that he's obstructing justice also in the context of the IRS. And that would mean probably tampering with a federal witness, right? Or with a whistleblower, right? So I don't know. I think that puts a lot of liability on Mr. Ochsner, right? So potential liability, right? Alleged liability. So I don't know. It could be leverage, right? So with that, I think I'm going to move on from that topic. Yes. So something also related to the IRS, right? And this is something. I have to. Actually, let's ask that question. I wanted to ask the question to a lawyer via the Venezuelan informant. I wanted to use this opportunity to ask the Venezuelan informant if you could please ask your lawyer if this would be the case, because this is something I saw in the pipeline, but I don't know if it's actually accurate, right? Because the pipeline sometimes, depending on how I tune it, it could be more aggressive, right? So I'm going to check it here, but I tend not to trust too much, what this ChatGPT thing and Gemini, etc., tells me on legal things, because sometimes the interpretation is wrong, right? If I ask a question here, but I'm going to ask the question to see. But I'm going to tell you what the thinking, what I'm seeing on the pipeline, right? So it's about the IRS employee that potentially trigger or will trigger or already even triggered, I don't know, right? I haven't checked, but that audit or action after I mail the 1040, the form 1040, the tax return, right, that I mailed. I described this before, and I was told by the informant that it got intercepted in transit. And then information about that form was reviewed. That form was reviewed by an accountant or a group of accountants of the network, and then they contacted somebody they have internally compromised at the IRS to trigger this action, right? To basically get me into a problem with the IRS and get my bank account frozen or whatever, right? Something like that. So what the pipeline infers, right? Because remember, I said in one of the demos that I emailed this form 1040 using a service called LetterStream. Okay, so let's start by that. Let's start looking at where does LetterStream.com is headquartered. Okay, so they are in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? Okay, so that means that when I sent the form to the IRS, to the office in Austin, I sent the form electronically to, probably Scottsdale, Arizona, right, where they have their offices and their servers, and then it got printed maybe there or maybe in a different state, right? They could have the printer in Utah. I don't know where they have the printer. Well, let's see. Let's ask the question, right? Where does letter stream? I mean, I don't know. This might be important, right? Uh, it might be important because of what I'm going to say, the legal implications, right? Yeah, so they have, yeah, this is important. So they have multiple printing locations, right? So besides Scotland, Arizona, it's possible that that file that I sent them ended up being in a third state, right? That is not Texas and it's not Arizona. And then the network intercepted the letter, right? Either digitally or electronically or physically, right? And it could have been done there, or maybe it could have been done in USPS. Like, I don't know the answer to that. But either way, they intercepted it, right? And then they transmitted that information to their accountants, probably using electronic means, and then they communicated using electronic means with the employee of the IRS that is going to harm me, right, with this, right? With this mistake that I probably commit. I don't know. Maybe there is a mistake in the form. I don't know, right? And that employee could be yet in another state, right? So there's multiple interstate communications. And this is important because what I'm going to say. So the pipeline thinks that if they trigger that action, right, it's an attempt to deprive me from property. For example, freezing my bank account or asking me to pay more money to the IRS. Whether it has merit or not, the pipeline thinks that there is an act of deception in here because they are making the IRS believe that this is an organic action. And it's not. It's something that they are triggering, but using back channels with the intention of harming me, right? So there's fraud being committed using interstate wires and with the objective to deprive me of property. So the pipeline infers that this employee that signs that action or that letter or that notice of action or whatever it is might be committing wire fraud as well, right? And tampering with the witness, right? But I don't know. So the question is, I mean, I guess this is the legal, more legal high-level question is the following. If the wire fraud statute applies only when the deception is directed at the person being deprived from property, or if the deception could be directed at a third party that could then cause the person to be deprived from property, right? So that's the question I'm going to ask here, but I don't trust Gemini for this, right? Because it's a very technical question. But I'm going to give it a try. So I'm going to say, in U.S. federal law about wire fraud, does the deception need to be directed at the person being deprived from property? Or could a third party be deceived to deprive another person, another party from property, and that still be wire fraud? I don't know. Let's see what the. But again, like these things, sometimes they get it wrong. Well, according to this, yes. The answer would be yes, right? But again, I don't trust much this, right? So if you could please, I'm talking to the informer, right? If you could please do me this favor, right? And check whether this could be the case. Because if that's the case, I'm going to report. I'm going to find that notice, whatever it is, and I'm going to report that person to the FBI, to the anti-corruption department, right? Uh, So it says the law focuses on the scheme to obtain property by means of a false pretense. It does not restrict, but this is very grave because then the IRS would be caught in the middle of this, right? I mean, they would. I mean, the entity depriving me from property would be the IRS, right? I mean, they're employee of the IRS, right? But it elevates the scale, the stakes of this immensely, right? Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it could be the case, but again, like if you could please check, because I don't want to file something with the FBI or something like that that is not accurate, right? So I need, for to take that kind of step, I need a human confirmation, right? So anyhow, that is for the IRS. Now, on a kind of similar thing, right? There's another item that I have been pending here for a while. It's about the health inspector, and I have to tell you, I knew this since like a month ago. Like the informant told me that they were going to do this, but of course, I applied my technique of shutting up. I didn't say anything because I was waiting for them to do it. The informant told me, and I have this recorded in my internal logs, told me like a month ago, right, that they were going to trigger an action with the health inspector saying that my pool, the pool that I have on the back of the Valley Side Drive home, was a health problem, right? Because the pool, because the house is empty, right? I'm not running the pool for multiple reasons, right? But the pool is not running, so the water is not clear, right? I mean, and this is common. Like when you see a house that is not occupied, people don't maintain the pool because like if they're gonna sell the house or whatever, then but the informant told me that they were going to use this excuse to report the house to the health department of Fort Bend County. And the goal of this is two things. One is to gain access to the backyard because I have locks on the gates. They cannot, you know. And there was already an instance before where they tried to get access via a company called United Locating Services, which is a company that works for Centerpoint, which is a big part of this network. And the CEO of Centerpoint, I reported him to the IRS via the Amazon shopping list, right, that I described before. He's in that list and he was reported. So United Locating Services tried to, they left me a notice in my door in that house saying that they needed access, right? So they were trying to use the utility asset easement laws to get access because they need to retrieve something that they put in the backyard of that house, right? That's one of the goals. And the informant told me this. And he told me, I'm not sure about this, right? He gave me this disclaimer. So don't, take this with a grain of salt. But he told me that he has seen these situations before in other contexts, right? Where they have to they trigger something like this to get the pool drained because it's possible they did something to the water in the pool. Like it's possible that the water is contaminated with something and they want to force me to drain the pool, right? Or to bring a person to maintain the pool to clean it, right? To, I don't know, neutralize whatever they did to the water, right? But he told me that he's not sure about this, right? So take that with a grain of salt. But the second goal could be to force me to drain the pool. And to retrieve something that they have in the backyard, right? Either way, it's destroying evidence, right? So that's the goal. That's the goal of this person. So this, I've known this for more than a month, right? But I haven't said anything. So now I come to that house. I don't know, like 3 days ago. I think it was on Wednesday, and I found this little number over there. Let me show you. Yeah, so create this folder because this I don't have. Uh, I mean, the same, right? Talk typing, right? I'm pretty sure the person is, of course, I knew this from the informant, and I'm going to show you that the house of the person is marked in the index. The same situation as with the clerk of the federal court. So you see the pattern, right? So this is a pattern of racketeering. This is what it is, right? They use all these employees of these state and federal institutions to harass people, right? And to push for whatever they need to do. So I created this folder, right? And that is called investigative leads. And inside of that folder, there's a folder for the health inspector, right? And then you can see the card she left in my home, right? She left this on the gate, attached to the gate with a piece of tape. And her name is Luz Velasquez, right? And she works for Fort Bend County Environmental Health. And her email is luzvelasquez at fortbendcountydx.gov. Of course, I emailed her very politely, right? A professional email asking her for the work order number. I need that number because I'm going to find out. Even if she doesn't want to tell me, I'm going to file for an information freedom of information act request to find out who was the person that supposedly reported the pool, right? So I asked her for the work order number, and she hasn't replied. And her house is marked in the index, and that documentation is also in this folder, right? This is documentation that I'm putting here in case authorities investigate these things. They have something to act on, right? Something tangible. So I think the property records is this one. Yes. So you can see it's registered to Luz Velasquez, right? To her. And she is the only Luz Velasquez that lives in Fort Bend County. There's no other. I mean, that owns property in Fort Bend County. And there is another document in that folder that shows that her house is marked in the index, which is, I think, this one. Right? You can see that the house is marked in the index, and you can see the points. And there is a point. This is not her house, but it's very close. It has 1.7 million. Like, she lives in a very important, prominent hub, right? And it has the geo features and the buffer zones and, like, the works. And she's emailing me saying that she's going to take an action because the water of the pool is not blue. It's not crystalline, right? Like, it's not transparent. So she's going to take an action against my house, my property, because of that. Because somebody reported that situation, right? So it has to be somebody that has line of sight to the pool. Like, it cannot be a neighbor a mile away. It has to be somebody that is next to the house, right? So I don't know. Let's see how that plays out. But I wanted to show this because it shows that there is a pattern, right, of using state institutions. This is Fort Bend County, right? This is the local government here, right? And I have that Monell claim against Fort Bend County for using the police and other institutions of the courts of Fort Bend to, deprive me from my civil rights, including my rights to familiar or familial affiliation, right? Like, they kidnapped my son using the court. So it seems like they want to keep adding evidence, right, to the docket, which is fine. So let's move on from the health inspector, and let's see what else we have. Right. So this one is very interesting, right? So this was this morning at 4:36 a.m. or something like that. I'm gonna tell you what it is, right? It's a playlist. It's already in YouTube, right? Yeah. So this is the playlist, right? So it has 3 videos, and I'm gonna show you I'm gonna tell you what you will see in these videos, right? So it's a vehicle that is driving in front of my house and the house of Joel Gray, John Miko, and all the agents on Teal Lake Court. And this vehicle is a very interesting vehicle, right? So you're gonna see a flashing light. I'm gonna describe what you're gonna see so you can focus your attention on that and see it. You're gonna see a flashing light of more or less the same pulsation frequency that video that I showed you before in one of the demos recently of the house of John Miko transmitting infrared to the house of Joel Gray, and the video of my black Tesla transmitting infrared to the house of Joel Gray in March 27, 12 hours before my son was taken from the home, right? So this vehicle has 2 devices, one pointing on each side of the vehicle, pointing to the houses, really. It's not the headlights. It's something that is directional to the sides, towards the sides. And it's transmitting infrared to all these houses. And if you look closely, you will see that in the cases of the house of Joel Gray and John Miko, the infrared beam, right, that is coming out of this car, and I have to tell you, it's infrared because I looked through the window and I could not, with the naked eye, see the light, right? This is only visible in this infrared camera, this night vision camera, right? The point in the houses where the beam hits is exactly the same point right, of those videos that I showed you before of the black Tesla transmitting to Joel Gray's house, and the other video of John Miko's house transmitting to Joel Gray's house, right? So this makes it obvious that this is a communication system that they have, right? And what this car is doing really is relaying an emergency message to these houses, right? There is something going on, or there was something going on, and at 4:35 a.m. this morning, that they wanted these agents all to know, right? In a way that didn't leave a trail, electronic trail, like they couldn't send a text message or an email or something, delivered short range with infrared communication to the houses, right? But this also tells me that all the houses on Teal Lake Court, I knew this, right? But I didn't have proof. But you will see in this video that all those houses have the same capability of receiving and transmitting and imaging infrared, right? Because the car turns in that street and does the drive-by and comes back, right? So he's basically giving a consistent message to all these houses for some reason, right? So I'm gonna play it so you can see the observation, right? So it's 3 videos really, because my system splits it in small chunks. So the 3 videos are here. So this is like a minute of video, but it's split into 3 small videos. So you see the vehicle pulsating, right? And you see how the beams are directed to the sides, right? To the houses, basically, right? So the objective of this car is to send information with infrared to the houses. That's the goal of this car. There's no doubt about that. And you see the car turns on. This is Steel Lake Court, right? And you see how the infrared hits right on the house, even on the house of the Grays, the other house in front of Joel Gray. Or Joel Gray. The last name of the agent is Gray, Gray. And then the vehicle disappears. And of course, I don't have line of sight to the end of that street, but the vehicle disappears there and eventually comes back. I think it's probably in this other video. Yeah, so you can see the vehicle coming back, and you can see the beam how it's hitting both sides of the street, right? And that is a in that signal, in that pulsating light, there is information encoded, right? It could be a short message, it could be a code, like I don't know. I don't have a way to decode it yet, but I'm trying, right? Because now I have multiple samples of this thing, right? I don't know, I have multiple, like more than a dozen samples, right? That I've captured through the last, I don't know, 6 months. So I don't know, maybe I get lucky and I can decode it. Or, if the Venezuelan informant knows what this signal was, please, throw me a bone here. Um, yeah, so the last video is when the vehicle was actually appearing in the frame. You can see it was just appearing there, but it's not a very meaningful recording. But the first video on this playlist, the one that lasts 40 seconds, seems to be the most meaningful. But you can see, Joel Gray and John Miko getting the information. More meaningful because I think it would compound, right, in terms of evidence with the other 2 videos of these houses using infrared communication, which on itself is not a crime, right? You can use whatever communication you want, but if you're using that to spy on a target and to harm the target, and that eventually resulted in the kidnapping of the child of the target, I think it compounds. So I wanted to show you that video, and also. I was checking the directory that Phil Denning gave me, right, when I moved in, to give you the names of the agents that live in this street, right? So there's 2, 4, 5 houses in total, plus John Miko. So the agents that are receiving this infrared transmission in this video are Bob and Delling Abernathy of 24910 Teal Lake Court, Joel Gray, the Chief Financial Officer of Baxter, 24918 Teal Lake Court, Gary and Diane Gray. So these are what they call the cats, right? So these are the actual cats. 24919 Teal Lake Court, and Larry and Jenny Ryan, 24903 Teal Lake Court. Now I have to tell you, Larry Ryan is prominent. He has the thing with the 2 with the name, so where the first name and the last name both are words that could be first names, right? So that's a marker. He also has the empty lot marker next to his house. He also has the lake next to the other house, right? So he has the geo feature of the buffer zone twice. And he's in energy solutions, quote unquote, the color, right? So that's an important area because, and I explain why, right? So he is, deeply involved in this, right? And the house is marked in the index, and I reported him to the IRS, and the works. But one thing that I did not tell you is that the wife, I imagine the wife, right? So Mrs. Jenny Ryan, she is part of the architectural review board of Lake Point Estates. So that tells you that they are very prominent because they're not going to let anybody, right, sit on this committee knowing that Robert Mueller and all these important agents, Eckerman and all those, and Mark Switcher and Fektovich, and they're not going to let a non-prominent member sit on that board, right? So that also tells you how prominent, and you can see that, right? So she's the chair of the architectural committee, right? So that tells you, that confirms that how prominent Larry Ryan is. Right? And the other agents that we haven't talked about are these: Jim Higgins and Sharon Higgins, which live on the house in front of Jenny Ryan and Larry Ryan. So the ones that are just in front. And they're very prominent because they're in the channel 02, right? And I've discussed this before. So they are very, very prominent. Yes. So just wanted to give you that overlay. So I'm talking about these houses basically so this is the Ryans, right? Where the lady is in the architectural committee, review committee. This is the one that I just mentioned. Higgins, right? Jim Higgins. And these are the Albernatis, right? And this is Joel Gray. This. And these are the cats, the grays, right? Or these. So that footage that I showed you, the vehicle was coming basically. Let me annotate it here. The vehicle was coming on this direction and turned here, right? Let me see if I can change the color. Yes. So the vehicle was driving on this street and then turned here, delivered the messages to all the houses, and came back, and then came on this way. Right? So that was the path that you saw in that video. Now, I've been meaning to say this for a while, and I always forget, so I'm going to say it here. So if you go to earth.google.com, this is Google Earth, right? You're familiar with this, but this has an interesting functionality that is very interesting and very useful, right, to debug things. Let me show you. So I have this map already, right, for Lake Point Estates. So this is my house, right, the one that I have with the yellow marker, and this is the house of John Miko, right, the 23. Sorry, the 2310, right? And now this is interesting. I'll tell you something in a second. Just let me check something here. So there is a tool that you can use. Where is it? Yes, historical imagery, this one. So you can go back in time on this thing, right? And you can say, show me. Yes, so see, this is right. Look, this is very interesting. Look, if you look at the image today, I mean, they're silly really when they do this thing. So this is what it looks like today, right? The house. Look, there is no object. Like you see the backyard, there is nothing here, right? In this point, what I'm showing you, let me do this properly, right? So if you look here, there is nothing, right? Like it looks like there is only grass. But if you look, and if I look through the window, there is the slide, the kids slide that I described before, that they use as an antenna to sniff the uplink, right? It's there right now, I can see it. But if you look at this image that supposedly is recent, it's not there. Now, if you look at this at the historical imagery, you see it, right? And this historical imagery is from March 21st, right? So, and I can tell you, it's there right now because I can see it, right? I mean, I'm able to see it right now. So the object is still there. I'm talking about this, right? It's a huge structure, right? It's taller than the fence, and the fence I think is like 10 feet, 10 or 12 feet tall. Like it's a tall fence, not like 10, probably 10. I mean, the picket is 12, but it's buried underground a little bit. So in reality, it's like 10. It's taller than me, right? If I stand next to the fence is way taller than me. Now, you can see the object here, right? And this is the historical, according to this, March 20, 21, 2025, right? But if you go to right now, you don't see it, which is not true. So what I'm telling you, they deleted in the last snapshot, they deleted the object because I can see it right now and I know that it's there, right? But that's not what I wanted to really show you. What I wanted to show you is that if you go back in time, you can see that they installed that object right after I moved in to this house. If you go back to 2024, I moved here in June 2024. If you go back to February, 2024, you see the object is not there. And this is interesting, right? Because I think this speaks about a state level foresight. The reason why they put that object in there is because they know where the Viasat satellites are located relative to the house, right? And they knew even a year and a half ago, before I even knew the name Viasat, right? I didn't know this company even existed at that point. But they foresaw that I could install a satellite connection that was not a Starlink, and that the only option was Viasat. So they placed that thing in there intentionally in the exact point where it would intercept potentially a Viasat antenna if I ever bought one. Right? That's what it means. Because the thing is positioned there perfectly, right? And it was positioned there even before I bought the antenna, even a year before. But that is the exact place where it needs to be for them to be able to do what they do, right? So that tells you that this is a state level plan. There's a state level planning behind this. And you can also see that because of the fact that after I posted that video and put that transcript in the book that I sent to the IRS, explaining how he was sniffing the antenna with that slide, right? Then what they did, they deleted the image from Google Earth, right? And you can see that if you go to today's image, the object appears to not be there. But if I look at the window, I say it, the object is there, right? So they deleted it from here. And who can do that? A state actor, right? Like not anybody, not any. I don't have the power to delete things from Google Earth, right? Not even when I worked at Google, I had that power. So this is a state level actor for sure, right? I mean, I'm talking whoever is paying John Miko to do this. Right? John Miko, Joel Gray, Larry Ryan, and all them, right? Robert Mueller, it's the same. This is a state plan. This is a state plan operation. So, with that, I think I've accomplished the goal of this demo 91-5. And of course, I'm going to transcribe this and put it directly in the book and, send it to the IRS again. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.